So finally, before we share the slides, I just wanted to say something about the purpose of today. We are very conscious that a lot of organisations are struggling to find funds, and that it takes a lot of time to research funders and funding opportunities. So we wanted to run this session to help you decide whether or not to go ahead with an application and to understand a little bit about the process if you do that. And also to say, we'll come back to this again at the end, but we would really welcome your feedback on this, and we'll add a link and send a follow-up link to feedback at the end. So now we will start sharing the slides, please. Thank you. So as I say, we are delighted to be sharing our new grants programmes that we have just launched. Next slide, please. Over the next hour, we're going to cover a quick introduction to LEF for those of you who don't know us, although I can see a lot of you do already. We're going to be introducing those new grant programmes, talking a bit more about the criteria, and then we will talk through some of the key eligibility and exclusions and what we won't fund. Then we will talk about how you can apply, and then we will take questions from the Q&A, and we've had some in advance as well that we'll address. So part of the reason for doing this is to be as open and transparent as possible about our funding programmes, about our decision making, and we really don't want to waste your time. And in that respect, we need to be upfront that we do always have more applications than we can afford to fund, and we think it will be particularly competitive in the autumn because we've just launched this round. But we hope that this webinar will help you to make a judgment about whether or not it's worth investing that time in making an application to us. Now, we do know that probably the key question for many of you will be, we fund your work? Will LEF fund your work? And unfortunately, we won't have time today to provide detailed one-to-one advice, but we do hope that by the end it will be clearer, the criteria, and also that if you then have questions or follow-up, you can arrange time to speak to one of the grants team members. Next slide, please. First, a little bit about us. We were set up in 2012 following the sale of the College of Law. Our legal name was and is the Legal Education Foundation, but as our work has evolved, we found that the word education often causes confusion and misunderstanding. So with the launch of the new strategy this month, we are going to just call ourselves LEF, which is what many people I know knew us as anyway. LEF is a social justice funder with a focus on shaping and using the law. We want to create a society where everyone receives the help they need, where our rights are respected and grown, and where we can all actively shape the systems that affect our lives. And we believe that the law is an essential tool to help realise these social justice goals. However, we are also aware that the law is often used to oppress as well, and equally that funders have a lot of power that can be used carelessly and harmfully. So we have been working within the foundation over the past 3 years to understand and to address the power and privilege that we hold as an organisation and as individuals within it. And we call this work power, culture and inclusion. And this underpins everything in our new strategy. But I do want to say at the outset that we have made progress, but we know we still have lots to do. Finally, before I talk about that new strategy, in terms of the organisation, there's a lovely picture of some of us there on the slide. We are 27 staff now, including the grants team, but we also have teams working on learning, policy, communications, operations, and we host the Justice Together initiative. And there are 7 of us who work on the Open Grants programme who you might speak to about an application or a grant. Next slide, please. So we have been working to develop this strategy over the past couple of years, and it very much builds on the work that we have already funded, and our direction of travel towards longer term, more flexible grants and valuing lived experience. And as well as learning from our grant and funding partners, we've worked alongside an external advisory panel, which brought a range of different experience and networks to challenge us over that period. Overall, we want to advance human rights and equalities across the UK and support work which has impact on the regional, national or UK-wide level. We believe that human rights and equalities face significant risk, and so we welcome applications that seek to address these by working collaboratively in complex landscapes. And we want to build on work that we've already funded, for example, on overarching human rights frameworks, disability justice, employment rights, housing rights, racial justice, and violence against women and girls. However, we would equally welcome applications that centre other underfunded issues where we ourselves have not funded as much, such as LGBTQ+ rights and women's rights beyond FORG, especially recognising how quickly the external context is changing. Our funding aims to build the long-term resilience and impact of organisations who are using or would like to use the law to drive a wider movement for justice. And I will now hand over to my colleague Ali, who will talk through the programme in a little bit more detail.
Thanks, Rachel, and hi everybody. It's good to see so many of you here today. So I'm Ali and I'm Head of Grants here at LEF, and I'm just going to give you a quick overview of our new Open Grants programme. So our aim is to create new connections between the law and communities facing injustice. Thanks. We are looking to fund organisations that meet two key criteria. The first is that they prioritise accountability to their communities, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a moment. And the second is that they are either already committed to using the law to influence change, or they'd maybe like to explore how they might use the law towards their wider influencing goals. By influencing wider change, what we mean here is that the work has a broader impact than individual outcomes. But again, we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. So we have two funds in the programme, which we're very excited to share with you. They are Emerging Justice and Strengthening Justice. Next slide, please. Thanks. So first of all, Emerging Justice, the Emerging Justice Fund. This aims to create opportunities for by and for organisations to explore ways that the law could help them achieve the change they seek. So this fund is for organisations that are by and for, and by this we mean led by the communities you serve, so maybe having lived experience amongst your trustees or committees and senior staff, or have considered wider ways of building power among the people affected by the issues you work on. And you will be working to protect and promote rights and equality, and you would like to explore how to add legal tools to your campaigning work. So in this funding stream, it's likely that you will have some understanding already of the law as it relates to the issues you work on, but you may not have used the law as a tool for change. So for example, you may already provide advice to individuals or share legal information, and this fund can support you to explore how the law could help you to influence change more broadly. For organisations that are by and for or community-led and are already using the law, the Strengthening Justice Fund may be a better option for you. There are two routes to funding under Emerging Justice, which depends on the work that you want to do. The first route is to apply for short-term or urgent work, and we'll fund that up to £50,000 for up to 12 months. These are shorter grants and are designed for smaller, more specific pieces of work. For example, identifying a possible legal partner, working with that partner to develop a legal strategy, or work to understand the law relevant to your campaign and identify potential changes and routes for influence. We'll aim to make decisions on these applications within a maximum of 12 to 14 weeks. And although they're smaller in size and length, these grants may lead to a longer term flexible grant through a subsequent application to one of our other funds. The second funding route under Emerging Justice is to apply for flexible funding to maybe test out a new legal approach or a partnership. We recognise that this type of campaign and approach involving partnership development, and that can take quite a lot of time to get right. And we want to, help you ensure that it's rooted in the views and experiences of the communities that you're working with. So under this strand, we can offer longer grants, up to 3 years, and of between £50,000 to £75,000 a year. But we would not normally fund more than 50% of your organisation's income. Again, you can apply for this route at any time, but we'll have 2 key decision points each year for the fund. Funding under this route could include using the law to hold institutions to account, for example, making complaints to ombudsmen or public sector equality duty challenges. You might want to influence the legislative process on your campaign issue to improve the law, or you might be contributing to strategic litigation. But we're really, really open to hear from you about your ideas of how you might want to use the law for change. There's a full range of all the different things we can fund under emerging justice in the guidance, but it does cover a wide range of costs, and that does include overheads. And I just want to add that under both strands of emerging justice, we can also offer support in accessing a legal advisor if you don't already have one in mind. So moving on to strengthening justice, please. So this fund aims to connect organisations already using and shaping the law more closely with communities facing injustice, and to create the space for those organisations to respond to emerging opportunities and challenges. Our funding decisions will be guided by those two factors that we mentioned before. The first, how accountable is your organisation to the communities you serve? So, for example, under this criteria, we'll be thinking about things like, do you work closely with the communities you serve and seek to increase your accountability to them? So that might mean, at a minimum, organisations that are regularly consulting with communities about their priorities and sharing their power to help communities. It could also mean being a by and for organisation, or operating as a membership organisation where their strategy is developed and delivered with those members. We'll also think about, do you ensure that those with the least power in your communities are heard, and do you adapt your work to reflect their needs and views? So, for example, sharing legal knowledge with partner organisations, co-creation of strategies or programmes with those communities. And we will be considering, are you working effectively in solidarity with those communities? We know that this work is a long-term process for many, and that you may be at different stages of that journey, as are we. And we very much recognise that and acknowledge that we are not perfect and that we're learning ourselves. We do see learning as an important part of accountability. And so what this fund can do is support you as you work towards those goals. So we want to work with organisations who acknowledge where they are and take a reflective approach to building and sharing their power. It's worth noting that for organisations who are on that journey towards accountability, we're more likely to fund you if we've already previously supported you. The second key factor is how your organisation uses the law to drive wider change. So, for example, are you actively using the law to build power in communities? Are you challenging and reshaping the law and policy to promote social justice? And are you collaborating with sector partners in your influencing and campaigning work? We want to partner with organisations that are using the law creatively and collaboratively, and recognise there can be a really wide range of approaches within this. So some examples might be using evidence from a freedom of information request to drive your policy or campaigning work, or using the public sector equality duty to challenge discrimination, for example. But it could also mean using the law to drive transparency or accountability in public bodies and decision makers, influencing legislation or supporting legal inquiries. Funding under strengthening justice is via flexible grants of £50,000 to £100,000 per year over 3 to 5 years to support your work. But we would not normally fund more than about 35% of your organisation's annual income. And again, a full list of things we will fund is on our website, but these grants can really be used to fund any cost, including overheads again. Next slide, please. This next slide is just a bit of the numbers behind our funding. I'm not going to talk through it, but just to flag that our board has committed an additional 15 million. So we expect to spend around 50 million on grants, support for our grant partners, and running the Justice First Fellowship over the period of this strategy. So that's our two funding programmes. And now I just want to talk a little bit more about our funding criteria and how we apply that in practice. Thank you. So we've already talked about the first two criteria in a bit of detail. The other criteria that we consider are that we will prioritise small and medium-sized organisations, and for us that means usually those with an income of under 2 million. This is to prioritise our funding where we feel it's most needed, with organisations that might struggle to find funding elsewhere. We are only able to fund organisations that are doing charitable work in the UK, but you don't have to be a registered charity. We support organisations that have some structure, for example, a constitution that sets out how your decisions are made, and have access to a bank account with 2 signatories, but that can be through a partner organisation. LEF wouldn't normally be your first funder, and in relation to reserves, while we don't require a minimum reserves level, we're unlikely to fund organisations that are insolvent. Another criteria is that we will consider the wider context in which you're working. This will include looking at opportunities for influencing the number and geographic spread of the people impacted by the issue that you want to work on, and who else may be already working or leading on the issue. Issues that are underrepresented by current work across the sector will also be prioritised. So this for us is really about weighing up the different needs within that external context in which you work. Finally, we wanted to highlight that we do favour approaches that will promote solidarity between different groups of people facing injustice rather than division. We don't want to advance the rights of one group of people at the expense of another, or fund work which might exacerbate existing divisions and cause harm. Next slide, please. Thanks. Just briefly to touch on some eligibility and exclusions. Some of these may feel obvious, others are not. First up, we don't fund work on criminal law, but we do fund work which focuses on discrimination within the criminal legal system. In relation to immigration, while we will fund work to strengthen migrants' rights, for example, on issues like employment or on housing, we won't fund work through LEF on improving access to justice for people in the immigration system, primarily because our support for this work is channelled through the Justice Together initiative, which we co-fund and we host. We also don't fund projects to develop or manage pro bono legal services. While we recognise there is a real demand for legal advice and legal services, we believe that this isn't a long-term or sustainable solution to the lack of legal aid around the country. We also don't fund projects where our funding would be replacing or subsidising government, the legal profession or university funding, and that does include the cost of law clinics. Like many other funders, there are some relatively common exclusions and eligibility criteria, some of which are on the slides here, but it's really worth checking the full list on our website before you make an application. I'll now hand back to Rachel to talk through the application process.
Build a website you love. Thank you very much, Ali. So, next slide, please. So for all our funding programmes, if you think this is the right opportunity for you, we encourage you to take our short eligibility quiz that you can find on our application portal. We have really tried to make our application process as flexible as possible, but we do need to know how you meet our criteria, and you can do this in one of these ways. We have an application form where you can answer 4 questions which address the criteria that Ali has just outlined. You can send us information that you already have. That could be an application that you've already prepared to another funder. It could be by sharing links to information on your website. And you could also tell us how you meet our criteria by sending us video content, which can either be pre-recorded or or something that you record specially for us. If they are not already publicly available, we do also ask for a copy of your governing document and your most recent accounts. And for Emerging Justice Fund, we are interested to know how much money that you need to do the exploring of using the law. For Strengthening Justice, because it is as close to core as possible, we do not ask you to request a specific amount. It's something we would discuss with you if the application is shortlisted. If you need help with your application, then you can book a call with the grants team. And there is also Word and PDF versions of both the application questions and the guidelines on our website, and there will be an easy read version of the funding guidelines available shortly. And we can also provide access payments for deaf, disabled and neurodivergent people to help with applying. One thing I didn't say that was on the other side of the slide is that you can apply at any time. And for the short-term grants under Emerging Justice, that is a rolling programme. For the Strengthening Justice Fund, there are 2 decision points, and so we will have 2 deadlines for those that I'll come back to at the end. So in terms of the process, yes, what happens next? I think I need the next slide. Yes, what happens next? There we go. So for the Emerging Justice short-term grants, the grants team will review and then. So for the Emerging Justice short-term grants, the grants team will review and then meet to make a collective decision on your application. For all applications above 50,000, there is a 2-stage decision process. And firstly, the grants team will discuss and agree which applications are the strongest against our criteria within the budget we have available. And we will let you know within 5 weeks of the deadline if we've been able to shortlist your application. The second stage process will involve an in-person or online meeting. And if you didn't complete the 4 application questions at first stage, we will discuss these when we meet and support you to complete them, as well as any other follow-up questions we might have. And we do ask for some more financial information at second stage, particularly about the current financial year. All second stage applications are reviewed and final decisions made by our grants committee. The grants committee will comprise 3 LEF trustees and 3 external members with lived and learned experience of the issues we fund, which we will be starting to recruit shortly. At both first and second stage, if your application is unsuccessful, you can ask for more detailed feedback, but we do then ask that you wait a year before reapplying. Next slide, please. So the key dates for the forthcoming round are that after this webinar, please do have a look, if you haven't already, at the information on our website. But then if you do have more queries, you can have a call with one of the grants team up until the week before the grants deadline, and those can be booked via our website. If you would like your application considered in the autumn round, the deadline for consideration is the 18th of September. And you will hear whether or not the application is shortlisted by the 20th of October. Second stage assessments will be from about mid-October to mid-November, with final decisions notified by the 19th of December. This is obviously a new set of grants programmes for us, and with potentially a wider reach of applicants. So at the moment we haven't published times for our spring round because we want to test out these timings and see whether they work for applicants and for us as a team. So we will be publishing those dates by the end of October, but they're likely to be a February deadline for a June decision. And I would want to emphasise that this is a 5-year set of grant programmes, so that there is time for people to apply over that period. This is not just, although we've given you the dates for the autumn round, this is going to be an ongoing programme over the next 5 years. Finally, just before we start to look at questions, I just wanted to mention that some of you will know that we already have a programme called the Justice First Fellowship, which supports organisations to employ and help qualify trainee lawyers. We are continuing to run that programme, but we haven't covered it today. It will open in January for applicants for next year. So there's lots of information about that on our website. Also, you can contact us, and if people would find it useful for us to do a webinar on the Justice First Fellowship, then also please do let us know that. Thank you very much. That is the end of the presentation. So I know my colleague I've got a couple of questions that came in advance, and then we've also got some questions from the Q&A.
Where would you like to start? I can read out the questions that we'd had in advance first.
I've got some of those already, but are there others that you would like to?
Well, I mean, we've had one question from Mark, who's asked, would either of the strands consider joint applications if organisations wanted to apply in partnership?
That's a very good question, and I should have mentioned that proactively. Yes, we would very much welcome partnership applications, and there is an opportunity when you register. It does ask, are you applying in partnership, and if so, tell us with whom. So yeah, that is very welcome. Obviously, we particularly expect it with emerging justice that you might have a partnership with a legal organisation, but any kind of partnership would be welcome. One question that we did have in advance that I could pick up now is we were asked about, for those of you that already have a grant under our previous strategy, whether you can then also apply for these new programmes. We know that competition is going to be very intense. So if you already have a grant and it's got some time to run, then no, you wouldn't be eligible to apply in for the new programmes. If you do have a current grant and you're interested in applying for the new programmes, then please do talk to your grants manager in the first instance. We do try and look at continuation or renewal grants at a point which really gives your staff the lead-in time that they need. So it's not that you would need to wait for your grant to end, and certainly we're trying to keep an eye on whose grants are coming to an end so we can have those conversations early, but do also feel like you can get in touch with us. But we wouldn't expect people to have parallel grants from our previous strategy from Ferro Systems or Stronger Sector and from the new programmes.
Thank you. Yeah, we've had a flurry of more questions now. Richard asks, will there be 3 or 4 rounds per year over the next 5 years on the Strengthening Justice Fund?
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, so you can apply for Strengthening Justice, you can apply at any time, but there's 2 key decision points in the year. As Rachel said, we haven't quite worked out the timings for next year, but it's likely that we will have an autumn round and a spring round. So essentially two deadlines in effect.
Thank you very much. Sandy asks, if you have a JFF grant, will it impact on decisions for the new programme?
So this is one where it's frustratingly not completely straightforward. It certainly doesn't mean that you are not eligible, but I think we do expect it to be competitive, and I think it is something that our committee has always weighed in the balance. If we've already put significant resource into an organisation, whether they can then make an additional grant. Sometimes they can really see the complementarity of needing to put some core funding into an organisation that really helps to underpin that Justice First Fellowship grant, but sometimes they might make the judgment that actually we need to invest the funds elsewhere. So it doesn't rule you out, but that might be one that it's worth talking to your grants manager on that for your Justice First Fellowship grant about before you apply.
Thank you. And I guess a semi-link to that is Claire's question, which is, if you applied for Strengthening Justice Fund, could you also be a named partner on an Emerging Justice Fund application?
Yes, that is possible. I think if that is possible. It might then affect, potentially, depending on the level of partnership funding through emerging justice, it might potentially affect how much we consider through strengthening justice. But yes, that is possible. And I guess one other thing that I didn't say that occurs to me is that if you're really not sure what you best fit and you apply for one and we think you fit with the other, then we can move it over. So don't feel like, if you got it wrong, we'd say no, and then you'd have to reapply in through the other one if we thought that's where you fitted. So we will, we hope that we will iron that out in advance through talking to you and through the guidance that we've provided. But if we do feel you'd fit better in another strand, then that's also something that we can do.
Thank you. I'm going to skip Simon's question now, but I will return to it just because we have a question from Sanchita who says, building on the partnerships question, do the partnerships have to be established, or is a model which has open partnership opportunities as part of their way it works? Or is a model which has open partnership opportunities as part of the way it works be supported, i.e. a very light touch application model which matches up the legal support they provide with community partners across a range of community partners? That was quite wordy.
No, I'm just thinking that might be one that we may need to dig into that a bit more afterwards. But certainly we do know that for some organisations, they don't know exactly who the partner is at the point they're coming up with a proposal. I think it really would depend on how central that partnership is to meeting the criteria that we've set out. I think if it hung on the nature of that partnership to meet our criteria, then I think that would be more challenging, unless it was an emerging justice short grant where the purpose was to actually find a partner.
Thank you. I will now return to Simon's question so it doesn't get lost. Simon wants to know if there are any changes to monitoring or reporting requirements.
Oh, yes, we didn't cover anything on that today because we were a bit worried about time. For new grants, we are no longer going to have outcomes for grants, and we are going to minimise what's required in writing, so that more of particularly the substantive conversations about what you've learned through the funding and through the work is done through conversation with us or through convenings. So that is the main change that we will be interested. We have two overarching learning questions in relation to the way that the law can contribute to movements for justice and the way that the law and communities can work productively together. And so that's what we'd be interested in learning about rather than specific outcomes for each grant. So I think that would be the main change. We would still expect to have a similar number of touch points.
Thank you. Fran would like to know, small and medium-sized grants are prioritised. Will larger organisations be considered if they closely fit the rest of the funding criteria?
Thanks, Fran. So I think the key here is about thinking around that external context and how we prioritise. So I would say larger organisations are very welcome to apply. It's not an absolute exclusion, but that we are going to be taking into account degree of need, and organisations that are larger or have more budgets available or have access to other funding opportunities is something that we're going to have to weigh up in the balance. So we've put that in as a guide, so it's not an outright exclusion. If there are other criteria, we will obviously be weighing that up. But it is about degree of need at the end of the day.
Thank you. Amy asks, would you consider by and for organisations as those that engage people with lived experience in all that we do, but lived experience isn't represented at leadership level?
A by and for organisation is an organisation that is run by and for the communities it serves. So although we very much don't put forward a kind of quantitative measure, we would expect leadership to be by and for. We have co-funded some research with buying for organisations, about the qualities of those organisations with Lloyds Bank Foundation, which I hope will be available soon, and we can share that. So there's much more, sort of thinking and background on that. But it is very much an organisation that is set up by and exists for particular communities.
Thank you. Alex would like to know, if we have a grant on the previous strategy, can we apply as part of a partnership but not the lead partner?
So I think it would depend on the level of that. I mean, it's not an exclusion, so I think it would depend on the level of that. It would depend on the level of the request, really. So if you have an existing grant and an organisation wanted some support in developing a legal strategy, and there were some costs for some days of your time within that other application, that would be absolutely fine, and we'd be very supportive of that. I think if it was a kind of co-partnership where it was, significant 50% of the funding every year, I think we would probably we would look at that in a different way in terms of how we would weigh the amount.
Thank you. Patricia asks, can you please clarify if the work can focus on a European level as long as it also has direct or indirect impact in the UK?
It would really have to have direct impact. Thank you, that's helpful. It would really have to have direct impact in the UK, and we would really have to be persuaded that that was significant in the UK, and that was the most effective way to make that change in the UK. Elements of it that were related to the UK, if it was possible, and also for us to be funding the sort of elements of it that were related to the UK. If it was possible, it might not be possible to make that distinction, but it might also be that we would make a contribution. That does remind me actually of another question that we got in advance, which was about the use of international human rights tools, and obviously we don't fund work on international human rights on human rights internationally, but we are open to applications that use international human rights tools to advance rights and equalities in the UK, in case that wasn't clear.
Actually, just a further clarification from, I think, something you did mention. Thank you. Yes, and actually just a further clarification from, I think, something you did mention earlier. Michael was just wanting to confirm, is there a waiting period before you can reapply if unsuccessful with an application?
Yes, there's a year waiting time.
Edward asks, can a parent charity apply and Edward asks, can a parent charity apply and novate the funds over to a subsidiary which greater meets the grant criteria?
We might need clarification on that word.
I don't know if that's a typo or if it's just a word I don't know. Yeah, possibly donate. Yeah, possibly donate the funds over to a subsidiary which greater meets the grant criteria.
I mean, I think if in effect what you're saying is kind of fiscal hosting, so the legal host of that grant in terms of like where the money would go, but the application is for work done by the subsidiary, then yes, that would be absolutely fine. We recognise that for some organisations, getting a bank account is challenging, and you need a fiscal host, but we do want that group to exist in some way, to have some kind of structure, just partly because we're not set up to properly support very, very small new groups.
Thank you. And my apologies to Edward. Novate means to replace with a new contract. So I think I've learned something from the webinar too. I think that is all of the questions we currently have. Do sort of flag if I've missed any. I don't know if there are one or two left from your pre-received questions.
There was one that we had about the funding of law clinics, which I know I've touched upon. And while we wouldn't fund a project that was solely the work of a law clinic, because our Strengthening Justice programme is core funding, we recognise that organisations may well be doing advice work or running a law clinic as part of a wider programme, and that's where looking at those other criteria alongside that work, so thinking about the wider change elements of the criteria alongside that, but we wouldn't fund a law clinic as an end to itself.
And I guess the related question I think I've had questions about recently is about whether or not we will fund advice. LEF does not really have a history of funding advice as such. We tended to fund more training and development. But just to be clear that we are happy to fund advice as part of like wider work. We're just very keen that that individual advocacy and support feeds into and sits alongside work towards wider change, given the huge need that there is for both individual and structural change. Is there anything else, Alex, that was coming up?
No, for the time being, there are no outstanding questions.
Last call for questions if anyone would like to type any questions in the Q&A.
Yes, Dolly has been in touch to say our organisation is led by and for people with learning difficulties and neurodivergence, with over 80% of our staff, trustees and volunteers having lived experience. How does LEF prioritise or support applications from organisations that are by and for the communities they serve, particularly in relation to people with learning disabilities, but not necessarily in leadership positions? Is the involvement of lived experience viewed as a key strength or priority within your funding criteria?
It is the short answer to that. And also, just to repeat that we do have People First is translating our funding guidance into easy read, which will be available on our website very soon. And we do also have access payments where that's helpful in terms of inclusion. And if people would like to respond to the questions in easy read, they're able to upload them in a Word document or email them to us in that format. So yes, we very much would value and prioritise that lived experience.
This video was created by...
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just conscious because people have to type that I should.
We are once again up to date with questions and answers.
Okay, I'm just conscious because people have to type that I should give them a moment. But if there are not any additional questions, then we can wrap up a little bit early and give people the gift of time in their afternoon. But we would really want to thank all of you for coming today, and we hope we have been able to provide some useful guidance for you. We will be sending a survey a form afterwards, so we'd really like your feedback on what was useful or what was less useful, so that we can improve and also clarify things on the website. There was a link in the Teams invitation to a place on our website where the slides will be. This recording will also be on the website, and then also the script that we have used today, more or less, so that if that's helpful to read. And Alex has got.
Well, sorry, I think we have sort of covered it a little bit, but Tashi in the chat has just dropped a question of, you mentioned that you're keen to fund organisations who you've previously funded again, but you're unlikely to fund an organisation across parallel funds. If the old fund is due to end soon, would you be happy to parallel fund?
So usually what we would do would be to make the decision earlier, but then the funding would run on. So we might, for example, we have quite a lot of organisations whose funding is ending in March 2026, and we would take them for a decision in December 2025, but the funding would then start in April 2026. So that would normally be how we do it. Obviously, the separate question about Justice First Fellowship, that wouldn't apply in the same way, that could run in parallel, but it's usually just we would make the decision early, but the funding would kick in following.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. As I say, on the website, there is a very simple little quiz if it's just helpful to work through eligibility. And then there is a little question that asks if you're confident to apply. And if you say no to that, it does then link you through to where you can book a call with Ali, myself, Alex, or Hannah, Joy, John, or Sheena, some of our lovely grants team. And we'd be happy to answer further specific question that you have once you've looked at the other material and have some, if you have queries on your application. Thank you so much then everybody for coming today.